All right. So we're going to go ahead and kick off, and we have some people joining us remotely as well. So thanks everybody for your time today. My name is Kat Wang. I go by Kat because nobody has time for 4 syllables. Am I right? Because we're all in cyber. All right. So I am the principal of our public sector team within Sandbox AQ, and we live in the strategic intersection between AI and quantum technology. So we'll talk a little bit more about what we found in terms of operational technology vulnerabilities, how it pertains to national security, but then, of course, giving you guys something very tangible to walk away from the session today. So thanks for your time. Ali, over to you.
And I'm Allie King, VP of Government Affairs at ForeScout. We are a 25-year-old company that not everybody's heard of, but we're a victim of our own success from the classic NAC story. But now, given the dynamic environment that we're in, it's not enough to see everything that's on your network. You want to be able to control it and then parlay that into automated compliance. And so that's especially significant for what we're doing, especially with like workforce shortage and all kinds of interesting things. So we're going to continue to kind of roll through. This is a pretty dense slide deck. So if you have any pressing questions, go ahead and just shout out, because we want to make this more relaxed and a conversation instead of like a stiff presentation. So don't be afraid to raise your hand. Okay, so the first one that we have here is your kind of classic slide where we're talking about OT, and you'll say, okay, interesting. It was like a Gartner term that was created over a decade ago that has thoroughly confused everybody. So Gartner, being digital classic cybersecurity, was like, what's all this stuff going on in the industrial space? Like, we need to have a terminology for that so we can understand what it is. So they created the term OT. But the challenge is that everybody in our classic space knows what that is. The engineers that run the industrial process are like, what the F is OT? What are you guys talking about? And don't touch my stuff. But it's connected to the internet, but don't touch my stuff. And so it really is kind of like stepbrothers. And we got to get them, doing karate in the basement. Like, that is the dream. That is the goal, the interoperability piece. We're not there yet. We're still in a position where if you're studying engineering in school, there's like a 98% chance that you will never have a cybersecurity course at all. And so that continues to create cultural issues for us, seam issues that only work against us. So as we continue to kind of walk through the history of all this, and of course, the most famous one, Stuxnet, is 15 years old. For those who celebrate the anniversary, I'm just kidding, it's like very dark humor, but that's okay. But we can continue to see that there's some pretty serious things that are brewing, and it goes beyond traditional threats to a classic IT system, which is largely IP theft, espionage, ransomware. They're going to teach you that your data is valuable. It's kind of one of the best things to happen. Again, dark humor, because everybody has to pay attention to it. They can't ignore it and pretend that, the risk doesn't exist. But where it gets really fuzzy and quite spicy is in the industrial space. So when you start affecting uptime, you start going after lifeline sectors, it's serious. There's health and safety issues attached to it. And so you're like, okay, got it. But where does that tie in with the military? Well, it ties in with the military, our ability to protect power, because a lot of this stuff is dual use. So think about rail, think about ports. There's a lot of airports that we leverage heavily that has all this OT in there. And the engineers are like, don't touch my stuff, because you can DDoS me just as fast as the Chinese. So like, don't touch my stuff if you're on the cyber side of the house. And so how do we bridge that gap moving ahead? We'll get to it. And so most recently, you probably saw like a Reuters article a couple weeks ago. It kind of popped during RSA, where they cracked open some of these intervers and they're like, what is this stuff in here? How did it like miracle itself in here? Oh, it's pretty serious. And so when we used to think that for renewables, that was more of like a green field for us moving ahead, it isn't this like old timey infrastructure that we built all of this like digital capability on top of. They saw this and they're like, we have a very serious problem, because even with like Commerce saying, okay, well, what are our options to be able to try and like limit this? This stuff's already deployed. So there's a challenge moving ahead, not just to prevent it from coming in, but to also aggressively identify and understand what our options are to continue to understand what's going on with supply chain. And so the next slide we have here is the longer list, and I'll turn it over to Kat to kind of take over.
Thanks. So I want to go back for a second and just acknowledge that this isn't just an OT problem that sits within, the DoD or any of our critical infrastructure, right? It also sits inside our buildings. It sits inside our homes. They are embedded in TVs that we use or are in our bedrooms. Don't put a TV in your bedroom. But I would also say that's happened over time because the Chinese or just major manufacturers realized how advantageous it would be to become the cheapest supplier of technology across the entire world. And hey, why don't we also monetize that a little bit by preloading with trojanized malware, right? So this is just an example of something we found. Imagine the things that people haven't found yet. So just remember that as you buy your next new electronic and that you're looking at security from all angles, we are prioritizing speed over security right now. That's a very bad thing. So that's why we're in this this OT conversation today. Okay, so if this was a Mission Impossible movie right now, this is a time when a British dude would come up and tell you, these are our problems. They would tell you as opposed to show you. So I can't show you, but I can tell you that there are some common themes here. Again, let us know if you want copies of these slides. Happy to share them after. We have been victims of our own success. America has grown, and as a result, we have this concept of technical debt. Also, we have physical debt and we have cryptographic debt, right? So we've got legacy systems, unsupported hardware and firmware. We've got poor access and credential hygiene, like hard-coded stuff directly into, the access levels. And guess what? We're not just looking at a human-centric world anymore. We're looking at a machine-centric world. We'll talk about AI in a minute. What they're after in getting intrusion here, command and control, and our data. People like to say data is the new oil. It is absolutely true. There's also no centralized key management or encryption for a lot of this data. So you can kind of weasel your way in, conduct lateral movement, exfiltrate whatever you want, and nobody's the wiser. We talk about TTPs and APTs and alphabet soup of more or less, staying on the line, living off the land undetected, all things that people are using OT vulnerabilities to conduct. We've also got operational constraints, deterred patching, maybe because people don't understand how to do it. They don't have the resources to do it. And then very brittle environments, infrastructure that was built in 2000 and late, like never updated, not meant to last more than 10 years, let alone the 50 years that it's already in commission for. And if we look at the timeline of all of the types of intrusions that have been infecting on the OT side, what you're going to see on this timeline here is if we just pick a point in time with Stuxnet, since that was the 15th anniversary. And yes, I do celebrate that anniversary because I'm a weird nerd like that. So when you go trace it from 2010 further down the line, you see 4 that I could fit on this slide in 2024 last year. Right. So they're coming in higher frequency. They're coming in more significant severity. These are things that we really need to be worried about. Okay. So we talked about the problem statement. Let's talk about how this isn't our monkey, but it is our circus. Congratulations, you've just bought yourself a house. You're going to have to worry about all of the renos that come with it. Yeah, all right. So we got rats in the basement. We don't know where the nest is, so we can't get to them. Okay, we've got hacktivists. Are they nation state? Are they state sponsored? I don't know. Well, what constitutes cyber war? Nobody's defined that yet. Like, we are very clear on what constitutes an act of war from the physical domain, but we still allow nation state actors, cyber adversaries to come and attack us from a cybersecurity standpoint, and we don't do anything. We don't have the ability to do a concert effort on attribution. Okay, well, when we bought the house, we didn't know all of these things happened, right? Like there was no standard that the city required that a house has to have a certain condition of sale. So now we've got flooding in the basement. We've got to deal with all these other things. There are no policies that help us determine what is critical for us to prioritize when it comes to S-bombing, like looking at our supply chain vulnerabilities. There are no hard, soft rules, and there are no consequences. So you kind of get what you pay for, and we got to figure it out. Another big problem, and the reason why we have been victims of our own success, and this has been a hard one to tackle, is there's not any funding behind this, right? So we spend all our money on our house and our utilities, property tax, et cetera. We don't really have a ton more to do some of this remediation. Oh yeah, and there's a tornado on the periphery. That is AI. So lots coming at us, lots we need to fix, and a huge vulnerability that basically has made it open season for national security within the United States. Hi, my name's AI, and I'm about to ruin your day. So AI, assuming it is actually AI, right? We're going to have a conversation at the bar about that later. But assuming that it really is AI, has been embedded in every single vendor solution that now touches our platform. Right? It's everywhere. So before, when we had secure by design, we still have it. Well, we have zero trust principles. All is really great. That was built for a human-centric world. AI came in and broke that. And now we have access, unfettered access for all of these different types of machine-to-machine connections that aren't held to zero trust principles. Another big threat vector. The average cost of doing, I would say, buying an American to do insider threat, $14,000. Or I can spend $14, send to agentic AI to crack your AI and find my way in and do whatever I want. Right, so it's lowered the cost of barrier to entry. It's widened the security vulnerabilities, the threat landscape, and we continue to embed AI everywhere. Now, I'm not doom and gloom. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be a part. It absolutely does need to be a part, or else we will lose. The United States will lose in this innovation war when it comes to digital transformation and accelerating into the new world. But we need to be very clear about what the security requirements are and make sure that that is ubiquitous across non-human and human identities alike. Now we got quantum. God, she's a real downer, this one. So you've got quantum and AI bridging together, colliding with each other. AI adoption is happening across all sectors. Cryptography is ultimately that's where we put all of our treasure in a treasure chest. And I hate to say it, a lot of times, because we're victims of our own success, we don't even know where some of that data is. We don't know where those high value assets are. We don't know what's wrapped in it, if it's legacy, if it's wrapped at all, who has access to it or what. On top of that, we've got quantum threats coming too, like talking about NSM 10, OMB, Memo 23-02, identifying what cryptography sits on your high value assets today, and then the AI exposure as well. Anything else you want to add on the AI front?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, we're going to keep going. I love this slide because it has the least amount of words on it. When we look at the types of intrusion that is doing data exfiltration, it's doing lateral movement, and then on the OT side, the number of vulnerabilities that have come in, we're looking at a couple of things. And if these aren't obvious to you, let me just kind of write it out here. Service accounts. Oh yeah, these are great. So how about Target? Got through an HVAC system. SolarWinds, that's a good one. How about, let's see here, bots, DataBot, just wrote about that on LinkedIn. That was fun. Lots on the container workloads side. IoT, MGM hack with the fish monitor. What was it? It was a thermostat. Yeah, they didn't know that fish tanks needed thermostats. I guess it makes sense, but why is it connected to the internet? Probably a good reason. That was another way that people got in. So can we thinking about these key topics, zero trust architecture, zero trust principles, security by design, just make sure it's got to be everywhere. Okay. All right. Do you want to take what the plan is, or you want me to go? All right, here we go. We're going to keep rolling, guys. Everybody okay? Everybody having fun? Oh, love it. Excellent. Okay. So what do we do? Well, first, not all data or platforms are created equal. We don't need to boil the ocean. Let's go to our most important areas and secure those first, right? What needs to be patched and what is a existential threat to not fixing that from a national security standpoint, from the warfighter's advantage standpoint, or maybe from like a continuation of our business standpoint, right? Small to medium-sized businesses don't recover within 6 months of a breach. So if anybody is not related to DoD, not working for the DoD, or has their own business, that's some food for thought. I've also put some examples down here of plans or execution strategies across the international landscape that might be helpful for you to take a look at. Also, secure the convergence layer. So we talk about IT and OT and the blend of that. I would just encourage everyone to think all of that is one thing. It all needs to be secure. And we need to make sure that every single new instance of access that gets made available to some of these entities are still held to the same criteria for zero trust principles and secure by design. Have a plan. Like if we got to make some changes to the house, you're probably not going to go do everything at one time, right? Your time is worth something. So let's start looking at implementing other things that specifically address the other 2 points. Like, do we need MFA for all this stuff? Do we want to get an SBOM? Do we want to hold our service accounts, our third-party supply chain vendors accountable for security so that I'm not liable if they get into my system because they had bad security? Cyber insurance. I really like this one. So what does the world look like if we can say, hey, we've reached certain levels of security resilience? How can I use that to buy down percentage points on my cyber insurance? Can I use that as a negotiating point, right? So if we don't have any money to put towards this, maybe some of these, pick one thing per day, per week that you can do, and maybe it'll lead to us saving more money as opposed to advocating for more. So this is something that Ali and other folks on the policy side are advocating for, is we need to get more visibility around OT vulnerabilities. So just know you're not fighting this alone. There are several people that are advocating for OT to be included in CMMC and some of these other standardization criteria to acknowledge the resilience that you guys are putting into safeguarding that from a national security standpoint. Sharing information. Yeah, I realized, like, somebody told me the other day, the only time we actually are forced to share is as children. Like, children are asked to share with each other because it's the right thing to do. But then when we become adults, we're like, I'm not telling you what I know. And we got to get away from that, primarily because that's how adversaries are winning. We're all fighting this war with one hand tied behind our backs and not sharing information. If we can get collective data, if we can help the next person, even if they're a competitor, that are from getting breached, it keeps lives, but it keeps people alive and the adversaries from winning, right? Just remember, they have to win once. We have to defend successfully every time. Okay. And
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to take over as well and kind of walk through some of this. So CMMC, it's not going away. We're going to have to continue to, no, it's not. So CMMC, like know your customer cloud, like anything that kind of was born in Trump 45, it's not going to, be settled in a dustpan anytime soon. So understand that for small and medium-sized companies, it is expensive. It's something that you're going to have to take in consideration for the pleasure of doing business with the department. So continue to lean in on that. The only challenge around this, and again, it's too early to tell, is that I hope it continues to evolve, because the challenge that I have with CMMC is that initially you had 2 problems, right? You had a, hey, you guys are lying to us problem. You said that you're following your NIST contract requirements, and obviously you're not. And then the, hey, nation state actors are attacking you. They chose to solve the you're lying to us problem. And they said, okay, now that doesn't sound good, pure marketing. So we need to make sure that we kind of like beef this up a little bit and say, no, if you do all this stuff, it'll give you enhanced protection. Objectively, yes, that's true. But it's like, shutting your door in a Cat 5 hurricane, you're still going to get water in your house. So we'll look to enhance that over time. So we're in a position where we can feed back into that larger DIB. Hey, this is what's happening. We're able to leverage AI models to be able to do some predictions on where we think the threat's going to manifest. And then you are in a position where you can actively adjust your security posture accordingly. So there's that. Also, legal and diplomatic tools. Right now, all eyes are on NATO. We are reapproaching, modernizing that relationship with them. They are going to have to go from a 2% GDP investment to a 5%, and aggressively working and talking to them, saying, "Hey, in that spiral up to 5%, you have to prioritize your cybersecurity, specifically the critical infrastructure assets that your military relies on to be able to execute their missions." And if you can look at any map, you can kind of see where the pipelines are, where the ports are, where the airports are. I mean, it's not like a hard thing to be able to determine, and you cannot assume that your regulatory requirements that you have in place are just going to, de facto get you there. Like, you actually have to do like large scale integration, pen testing, understand where you have some shortfalls. So there's that. Now, the other piece on here too is AUKUS, Pillar 2. Very exciting. Now, under the initial vision for AUKUS, submarines always overshadow everything apart that agreement. But Pillar 2, they want all the Gucci stuff, right? Like offensive cyber, some like really like razzle dazzle AI, quantum stuff. They're running into an ITAR buzzsaw right now, which I'm not surprised about. And so I'm actively working with them saying, hey, okay, like, let's start out small and let's focus on the stuff that isn't ITAR sensitive, like your OT, like all the US bases that we have there that we do interoperable operations with you. Like, let's start there. Let's look to leverage the investments the United States already has, Comply to Connect program, be able to scale that more broadly to include OT. Let's have that conversation, specifically because, I mean, the United States on the Comply to Connect contract had already spent over $100 million in investment. You can leverage that because you're short on cash and you're one of our closest allies. So let's kind of start there, have something that we can show for it while we kind of figure out what the legislative fixes are for some of these other high-end heartburn issues. And then, of course, readiness declarations. So circling back on the DoD, there's something called a CORA, which is a cyber operational readiness assessment. This is the only mechanism that I've been able to find in the department that holds people accountable for satisfying zero trust principles and a whole laundry list of things that they need to do if you're a facility or an installation to connect to the DoD. They need to extend that and include OT on that as well. It's not there yet, but this is the one opportunity we can already leverage. We're not creating something solely different, but it does put that base commander in a position, because if you don't get your CORA, you're not going to get colonel. And that motivates people. They get religion on it. And that also creates an opportunity to figure out, hey, what exists within the market for us to satisfy these requirements? And people compete on that, right? Competition is good. There isn't a single tool or vendor that can do everything for everybody. So hopefully we can continue to kind of push ahead in that direction.
Excellent. All right. We're pretty close. Thanks for hanging in there. There's 2 slides left and they're all pictures. All right. So other things that you can do. Network segmentation. This is very straightforward. We're not going to put all our eggs in one basket, right? We're going to section things out so that just in case we already have an intrusion issue, we're not giving them the keys to the kingdom. Access controls, this goes back to zero trust principles, regular patching. I know it's hard. We can do this. And then ConMon, continuous monitoring and detection. Just look for the anomalies, right? But also look for the noise too. There are ways that we can get really creative with doing the technical integration so that you get more visibility. But it all starts with figuring out what is the most critical thing to secure. We start there and then we create a path forward. And then I would just leave you with these very high level ideas. Theoretically, if we just pick one thing, one thing to start with and just give ourselves a path with one thing per week that we're going to remediate, it's better than doing nothing. I'm asking you to eat healthier or go to the gym. Pick one thing that helps your job a daily day to protect yourself from existential threat. Visibility is a form of deterrence, right? Segmentation is a form of resilience. And then once we get incentives included in this, then that becomes a support for structure for compliance, et cetera. So thank you. We can answer any questions you might have. If it wasn't obvious, my colleague here, Allie, is the Michelin star restaurant. I am the Applebee's. So just keep that in mind when you ask the questions, and yeah, point to either one of us. We're happy to help. Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Hi.
You brought up quantum and you briefly touched on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious, what kind of work are you doing today in that space?
Sure. Absolutely. The question was, quantum was brought up earlier. What are we doing in this space? Specifically post-quantum cryptography. So NIST, NCCOE, CISA, NSM, OMB. Wow, there are a lot of acronyms. All of these entities, including the international one, ETSI, et cetera, there's a lot of acronyms, are all focused on this world where quantum computing, which depending on who you ask, is anywhere from 5 years to 20. Based on what I'm tracking, and I track it pretty hard, it's closer to the former rather than 20 years out. We are supporting all of those entities with post-quantum safe cryptography. Like we're talking about ciphers, lattice-based ciphers, that will help kind of wrap your high value assets in something that'll be a lot more resilient to post-quantum or quantum computing. So there's a couple of ways that this manifests today. Some entities that are pretty strongly focused on cryptography because either they're working with high value, super sensitive comms data or just data in general. They do a double wrap burrito. So anybody's a Crunch Wrap Supreme Taco Bell fan, you take classic computing and you take your classic, I'm here all day, everyone. So you'll take your asset, you'll wrap it in something like existing cryptography that is good for classic computing, and then you'll double wrap that burrito with post-quantum safe cryptography as well. So that's one of the areas. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Please don't let that be the one thing you take away is the fact that I know a lot about Taco Bell's menu.
What is the result of what you guys are you providing recommendations to these that are you working with businesses on this by guiding them, because there's obviously the readiness.
Yep. So here's a dirty secret. The reality is that you don't need a quantum computer to crack our shit stuff. God. You don't need one because we don't know where all of our data assets are. And as you can see here with OT intrusion, people are coming in, taking it out and doing whatever they want with it, but decrypting it now. So that's the big problem. A lot of people think about quantum or post-quantum cryptography as being something in the future. It's not. It's actually happening now. It stems from the one thing is you can't see, you can't fight what you can't see. So the way that this is working right now is you start by giving yourself an MRI across your entire infrastructure. Understand where are your valuable assets, what's currently being used for your cryptography, and who's touching it, whether it be human or non-human identity. And then beyond that is, okay, well, if anybody does get into my system and quantum computing is going to be, I don't know, 5-10 years away, I need to double wrap that burrito so that if anyone steals my stuff today, then they can't decrypt it, even when quantum computing becomes a thing. Yes.
So, love transparency, of course. Love, thank you for the S-bomb shout out. Let's talk about other types of transparency that we may need. And if it's not going to come from government mandates, are there ways that we can use industry standards, certifications, contract language to start pushing for other types of transparency? And what would that look like?
Okay. So I'm telling this is tough. You're basically, I'm backing into this a lot, training 8 million people, 8 billion people on the planet to understand cyber and the value of their data. That's kind of the end game that I'm getting to here. The transparency doesn't matter unless the people care about it, or it results in some kind of a benefit. Otherwise, there's no point in wasting cycles over it. So I do think a stronger effort needs to be made on workforce development. We should have you talk about that, as well as education early on. I think that we need to get as granular as the elementary school level to understand media literacy and cybersecurity awareness. Like, it is going to be a make or break if children in the United States grow up thinking that it's okay to, I don't know, take photos on your phone and that won't go anywhere. That's simply not the case. Children's, the schools systems are getting breached right now and their data is being exfiltrated. Kids are not going to know the full weight of that breach until they apply for their first loan, right? There are criminal records in there. There are financial records in there. There are behavioral learning disabilities, healthcare information in there. Like, the transparency is critical. I don't have an answer to it, but the best way I can think of is I'm going to tell every single person in my network, especially the kids, about how to be cyber safe. Workforce?
Yep. So workforce. And so you've probably seen too, there's like a running stat that it's either 600,000 or 700,000. It's kind of hard to tell, like open billets in the United States. Of course, it's much broader other places. And so, whether you carry the one or you do some like weird accounting is a lot of people. And so the challenge that we're going to continue to have is that as cyber continues to expand beyond the traditional IT, we have to Kat's point, find a way to train everybody. And you always want to start with like the younger kids, just because they might have intellectual curiosity. As you get older, like people just are indifferent or they don't care. So that's always going to be a challenge. But specifically as it relates to OT, you probably have heard of cyber-informed engineering. That's a good first step. But like that needs to be incorporated in every engineering curriculum, undergrad, grad, across the country, like post-school education. We don't have that. And that's from an industrial perspective where I get really nervous. Every single SVP of operations at a company needs to be aware of this because they understand uptime. They don't understand firewall, right? They're like, what is that? That's just something that you're asking me money for. But oh, if you're going to affect my uptime, oh, hell yeah. That's time value of money right there. I understand that. And so being able to look to leverage cyber-informed engineering, understanding that we need to go so much deeper. There was a conversation around insurance. I love and hate insurance because last Congress, there was a hearing, House Homeland, where they're talking about a national backstop for some like significant catastrophic episode. And they want to model it after the flood insurance, which I'm like, that's a bad idea. Okay. It's a bad idea because flood insurance is for after the storm. It doesn't prevent the storm. And I don't think you can transfer the moral hazard of like actually doing everything you need to do to systematically buy down your risk, depending on what vertical you're in. And so while yes, I think that it could be an instrument, but we need to have like legally recognized standards for duty of care in every single vertical, but we can't do that until these engineers know what's going on. And so we've got a hole to dig out of. And in doing that transparency piece, there's an understanding of not just like why my data is valuable, but like how do I continue to operate in a safe, healthy manner that systematically buys down the risk. That I think will be a tide that lifts all boats, but we have to start somewhere. It is a giant mountain. But that's one that Kat and I are willing to die on. Yeah.
So ready. Do we have a hard stop? Is anyone else here? Okay, quick. That's it. All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.